La ike dan le jing ge zhu ban da dan mi ke nan dan zhou wa gong ji zhe nan ji zang ba dan che ge du da ji ji den du. In the language of the gods, Nagas, and Yaksas, in the language of demons and of humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. Now, you as students, imagine that you are calling all sentient beings here to be your guests, to be able to hear the teachings, so that they can come here to have the same thing happen to them that you're trying to have happen to you, and that's have suffering end forever, and be able to achieve the state of highest happiness that's possible, being able to achieve the most reliability that's possible, being able to become perfectly wise, perfectly compassionate, perfectly skillful. And I think that if everyone was asked the question, every being in the world, if they'd like to have these qualities, we would all answer with a resounding yes, 100%. I don't want any suffering. I want the bliss. I want as much happiness as possible. I would love to be reliable and never, ever let anyone down. I know when I let people down, that doesn't feel good. The Buddha never lets anyone down because the Buddha always knows exactly what he or she needs to say to sentient beings to try to help them evolve. Imagine if we could have these kind of qualities. And I think everyone imagining if they could have these kind of qualities, it's like a superhero. It's superpowers. It's the kind of things that we read about in Marvel comic books, or we read about the ability to be able to do these magical feats. And usually they're, to do kind of mundane things when we look at regular superheroes. But when we look at the Buddhas have the ability to really work with every single sentient being in the universe because of the qualities that they've developed through the maturation, through maturing on the path. And we all have access to this information. We all have exactly the same thing to look at and put into practice in our lives that will make us into a being just like Buddha Shakyamuni. And I think everyone agrees that's awesome. So imagine now, because in order to become a Buddha, you have to become a bodhisattva. And a bodhisattva works day and night for the needs of sentient beings, gets to the point where he or she can fulfill all sentient beings' needs, all of their own needs, because the goal is to become a Buddha, who has that capacity, who can really, really work with sentient beings in their own individual ways to get them to be able to understand the truth of suchness. And that's all the Buddhas, the bodhisattvas, can really do at the end of the day, is teach you what you need to hear in order to evolve from your own personal side. This is all that can be done. So we imagine that we're then acting like bodhisattvas who are leading beings to the truth of suchness, leading beings to the truth of bodhicitta, leading beings to the abandonment of a self-cherishing attitude, leading them to the abandonment of the self-grasping ignorance that gives rise to the big mess altogether. We're leading them here to be able to hear these teachings for the same reason that we're here. Is to be able to fulfill our needs and all sentient beings' needs. So imagine in this wonderful way that you bring every single sentient being in the universe here, any being that has obstructed any kind of obstructions, afflictive obstructions, obstructions to omniscience, anything that's keeping them from being perfect. Imagine that they all come here to learn how to become perfect, learn how to not have any of that discontent, have any of those negative feelings, not to have any of the 8, 6, or 3 types of sufferings. So imagine we're bringing them here to share that incredible gift that the Buddha came to share with us. And we're sharing it with them so that we can train our minds, tame our minds, make our minds more like a bodhisattva, so we eventually evolve into a bodhisattva. And then from the bodhisattva grounds, we know that the Buddhas arise from the bodhisattvas. So we know that in order for us to arrive at that place where is our final kind of destination in terms of qualities we can achieve, we will achieve those qualities in dependence upon the pathway that we're studying right at this moment. And all sentient beings will do the same. There isn't a different pathway that some sentient beings will need than others. The teachings for beings of 3 capacities encompass everything that all sentient beings need to be able to achieve that final goal that was just mentioned. So imagine you bring all the hell beings, hungry ghost beings, animal beings, humans, demigods, and gods. Imagine that every single sentient being is here. Any being with afflictive obstructions or obstructions to omniscience is here, and they're here and they're ready to listen. Imagine that you've somehow, got them all here, called them in their individual languages to come here, whispered whatever Dharma they needed to hear in order to influence them. And imagine that they're all here: hell, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, demigods, and gods. And you've brought them all here to hear all of the teachings. Just imagine that you've brought them all here. Now, imagine that you are all going to engage in a practice together to be able to calm the mind down. So now this instruction is being given to all sentient beings, and you're imagining that you see all your friends, enemies, neutrals, all sentient beings. Every single sentient being in the universe is here. And now we'll all together try to get our minds into a kind of calm place, a place from which we can really listen to the Dharma, a place from which we can grow virtue, an open-minded place, a wise place. And the way that we do that is the same way that we do it every single teaching. We're going to get into the 7-point Vairocana posture. All of us imagining just so many beings, countless beings now in the Vairocana posture, in this posture. So now you and all sentient beings are in this Vairocana posture. And you're going to focus when we do meditation and fixed meditation, or meditation where we're trying to get our conceptuality down. There's certain techniques. And one of the techniques is to focus on the breath. So we're going to be in the 7-point Vairocana posture with all sentient beings who are empty of inherent existence, just like you, and just like the practice we're doing is empty of inherent existence. And we're going to breathe in and out and count the breath, breathing in, breathing out, and counting. And we're also going to visualize in the front generation form, Buddha Shakyamuni, beautiful, radiant, just the most beautiful picture, the one that you always imagine when you imagine it. You want to keep the image the same. Imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni is about an arm length away, about thumb size, eye height in the space in front of you, but actually there, imagining Buddha Shakyamuni actually there, but fixed. Like a real being, but fixed, not animated and not moving. Because when we do single-pointed concentration and we use an object of observation in the front, we want to make sure that that's a fixed object. So we're going to breathe in and out, count the breath, and we're going to then multitask, as Geshe Dorji Damdu would say when he does multitasking. And we're going to also have Buddha Shakyamuni in the front generation form. So it's breathing in and out, counting in Buddha Shakyamuni. So let's all do that and get our minds into a calm place, focused on an amazing being, an amazing being that has no negative qualities, only has excellent qualities. And it's a being who has the realizations that we will have, because all sentient beings have Buddha nature. We will all become a Buddha. The Buddha will not rest until we're all Buddha. The Buddha acts spontaneously to make sure that we will all become a Buddha. And we just need to go through this process to mature. And it's amazing that we can focus on this being that's so pure that we will become. And it's inspiring. It allows us to generate and accumulate merit while we're getting a skill, which is single-pointed concentration, fixed meditation, and eventually it'll become shamatha once we really, really get good at it and practice it long enough. Okay. We're so fortunate to be here this evening to listen to a teaching on Lama Tsongkhapa's source of all my good, foundation of all good qualities, begging for a mountain of blessings. this text that encompasses everything that we need to know in order to become a Buddha, in order to become that perfect being that we're visualizing. Now imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni suddenly becomes animated, and that Buddha Shakyamuni has been containing the entire time the merit field. And from this animation, imagine that there's like an explosion, almost like fireworks that occurs. And now the entire merit field is in the space in front of you. Buddha Shakyamuni is very animated, and the merit field is very animated. We're imagining Buddha Shakyamuni, imagining holy beings, any beings that you consider enlightened, considering just like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, imagining Khyentse Geshe Wandak smiling and looking into our eyes and being so proud that we're engaging in these studies with that love and compassion that the bodhisattvas have. It's so different, but it's the same love and compassion that we'll have when we evolve into great beings like Khyentse Geshe Wandak. So just imagine Khyentse Geshe Wandak smiling in the space in front of you, imagining Geshe Lobsang Gompo, Demolocha Rinpoche, Khyentse Lobsang Gyatso, imagining Geshe Dorje Damdu, Umzula Geshe Aga, Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladrin, Jeffrey Hopkins, imagining Chado Rinpoche, Ani Thupten Chodron, all these holy beings, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, imagining all these enlightened beings in the space in front of you that we're so connected to. We're so fortunate that we receive teachings from them and can receive teachings from them. Now imagine all the beings from the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Maitreya and Asanga and Dharmakirti and Dignaga and Vimuktasena and Haribhadra and Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha, Lama Salimpa and Atisha, imagining all those holy beings in the extensive deeds lineage, the beings of the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Nagarjuna and Buddha Palita and Aryadeva and Chandrakirti and Shantideva and Baba Vega and Chandrashita and Kamala Shila, imagining all of these incredible beings, and again, imagining Lama Salimpa and Atisha. So fortunate that Lama Atisha combined these lineages so that we can understand not only the grounds and paths so purely, but the Madhyamaka Prasangika view in a flawless way. We're so fortunate to be connected to this lineage, connected to the lineage of blessings passed down from Vajradhara to Saraha and Matripa and Tilopa and Naropa and Losawa Marpa and Milarepa and Gampopa. That jeweled ornament of liberation Gampopa wrote that was just so amazing. We can read it today. It's in the English language. We're so fortunate to be able to see the Lamrim tradition in all of the lineages. We're so fortunate. When we look at the teachings, we see that the stages of the path are necessary no matter what. There's no shortcut. We have to have the foundational teachings. And we're so fortunate those foundational teachings are there. Everybody wants to become Milarepa. If you want to become Milarepa, read Gampopa. If you want to understand how Milarepa became Milarepa, understand what Gampopa is presenting, and you'll find that Gampopa is presenting exactly what Lama Tsongkhapa is presenting in terms of what we need to do in order to mature to the place where we could really truly understand the nature of the mind, understand Mahamudra, understand highest yoga tantra, understand the union of bliss and emptiness, understand grounds, and paths and path and result and all of these different things. If we wish to understand them, we're going to need to have the foundational teachings, and we're so fortunate that we have them. We have them in English language. We don't have any excuse to say, oh, we just didn't know, and that's why we skipped ahead. We really know the difference because we have these incredible texts, and I just want to rejoice in the fact that these holy lamas took the time to show us exactly what we needed, and none of them were satisfied with partial instructions, even Milarepa. There were no partial instructions. When we read those verses Milarepa writes, and we read some of the extended things that Milarepa wrote, we see that it just sounds just like the Lamrim. And we know that that means that these are the things that are needed to see the nature of the mind. Imagining that Atisha's passing down the Lamrim lineage to Dron Tompa, imagining all the three old Kadampa lineages we're so fortunate to be connected to, imagining all these beings are in the space in front of us, imagining the beings of the Nyingma lineage, Padmasambhava, Sakya lineage, Sakya Pandita, Sakya Kunganimpo, imagining Kaji lineage, the Karmapas, imagining Galupa lineage, imagining Lama Tsongkhapa, Kirtabje, Jelsabje, Penchen Sanandrapa, Bansu Juji Jetson, Jayan Sheba, Gonju Jimmy Wampo, Janja Rupi Dorje, the seventh Dalai Lama, all of these beings, Prabhu Jok, Jetsumba, imagining all of these holy beings in the space in front of us, in the merit field we're so connected to. We've heard so many commentaries and explanations of teachings, and they all trace through these holy, holy beings we're talking about. We wouldn't be able to know of the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment without the extensive deeds lineage. We wouldn't understand equalizing, exchanging self with others without the profound view lineage. We wouldn't understand grounds and paths without the extensive deeds lineage. We wouldn't understand the Madhyamaka Prasangika view of emptiness without the profound view. We wouldn't understand grounds and paths without the extensive deeds lineage. And we wouldn't be able to understand the Madhyamaka view of emptiness without the profound view lineage. So we're so fortunate that these lineages all are here and that we're so connected to them, and that these authors like Panchen Sonandrapa and Laman Tsongkhapa and Jayan Sheba, and they all wrote in order for us to truly understand what these Nalanda Pandits and Buddha Shakyamuni were trying to talk about. We're really fortunate. Now imagine all the highest Yoga Tantra deities, Performance Tantra deities, Action Tantra deities, all of the 35 Buddhas with that their powerful basis of purification in the space in front of us. Imagining all of the protector deities, the small, medium, and great scope. Imagining Vaishravana and Dharmapala and Mahakala. Imagining Palden Lamo, all of the Dharmapalas, imagining them all there, all in the space in front of you. We're so fortunate. Now that all beings are here, we have all sentient beings here that we've brought here as our guests to be able to hear these teachings, to be able to learn how to get rid of these negativities in order to achieve a complete freedom from suffering, in order to achieve complete bliss. We imagine all sentient beings are here to have that, and that experience in their future, just like we want. And we imagine now also all the enlightened beings are here. So every being, sentient being and not sentient being, meaning enlightened Buddhas, are all here. And with this in mind, now we'll recite the Heart Sutra. So the Heart Sutra, we've been talking a lot about emptiness and talking specifically about the textbook by Jeffrey Hopkins, Meditation on Emptiness. And tonight, we're not going to read anything from it, but we will definitely be speaking of the subject matter, because that entire book is about object of negation. What is the Buddha talking about? When the Buddha says that things here, there's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no smell, etc., no sound, no taste, etc., the Buddha is talking about something specifically. The Buddha is not saying that these things don't exist. And many interpretations of this scripture come to the conclusion that that's what the Buddha is talking about, that there's no self. Self doesn't exist. You just have to realize this somehow, that there is this nothing. And then once you get to this nothing somehow, then that's going to solve all of your problems. Just this nothing solves all your problems. And what the great commentators would say is that nothing that they're thinking this is about is called nihilism. It's a whole tradition in and of itself, but it's not our tradition. And when there's talk of no, we have to know what the Buddha's talking about. And the Buddha's talking about the mode of subsistence. How does the self really, really work? This self of person, this Jeff. Is there an inherently existent Jeff? Is there an objectively existent Jeff? Is there a Jeff that's findable, that can hold himself up without anything it depends on? Is there a findable I that doesn't depend? Because if there's not a findable I that doesn't depend, it means that it depends. And if it depends, then it's not inherently existent. Something can depend but exist, but if it does depend, it doesn't inherently exist from its own side. It exists through dependent origination. So these things that we feel have such concrete, findable-ness about them merely are brought into reality through nominal designation, through naming a basis of imputation. And that basis of imputation from its side is a collection of parts Even just saying parts gives it too much truth. It's just a collection over there that subjectively then I collect somehow the data of, and then decide subjectively to name it as this or that, and give it all of these qualities from my own side that I think it has. And then I think that those qualities and everything that I think that it has, I collect this data and this thing comes up into my mind and I see it's a Fender guitar. I like a Fender guitar. And this thing comes up in my mind and I name it as Fender guitar. I don't see any of that going on. All I think after that all takes place is that there's this objectively real Fender guitar that's externally itself the way that I think that it is from its own side. And I think that everything around me exists in that way from its own side. It doesn't require me to intervene. But in order for me not to think that that thing's a dog toy over there, I have to intervene and say it's a shoe from my side. I have to say that collection over there is a shoe, but my dog goes, that collection over there is a toy. Doesn't ever think of putting it on her feet. Would never imagine it. I'm not in dog brain, but just I'm making this simple, right? Just so we can think of a simple thing and then think about your neighbor and how are appearances to them? Do you like their hobbies? Do you think their hobbies are as important as their hobbies are to them? Why is that? When you think of your thing, a label, a name of your thing, it gives you all of this wooziness. It gives you some sort of like, oh yeah, that thing, that's my thing, right? But it's just a label, and that thing doesn't have any objective existence from its own side to have the qualities that you're giving it or the value that you're giving it or the exaggeration that's going on, because you and your neighbor don't agree. You just don't agree on the value even of the object. You agree on the object and you're having an experience because of some collective karma of an object. You're in a human realm where these things are shoes. So you're having a common thing where you're, able and willing to say that's a shoe. Your neighbor will say that's a shoe. But then there's all this other stuff that's going on. It's a good shoe. It's a bad shoe. I wouldn't wear that shoe. That's an indoor shoe. That's an outdoor shoe. I wear they call them my slips. They're supposed to be like shower shoes, but this is like my go out in the world shoe. And Lori's always like, well, how would you go out in the world in those shoes? Those aren't go out in the world shoes, but they're go out in the world shoes to me.
Don't wear those.
So you see, I have no problem with these shoes being my go out in the world shoes, but Lori sees these shoes and says, these aren't go out in the world shoes. But I think they're perfectly suitably to be named as go out in the world shoes. Shoes, we all both agree they're shoes, but I think they're go out in the world shoes. She thinks there's no way they're go out in the world shoes. So we are already disagreeing about the shoe itself and its function. Its function, like you can, it functions here but doesn't function there. We actually disagree on its functionality in different atmospheres. That's just a sandal. Think about how much we do this too, how much we superimpose with labels. And those labels, then we hear a label about something and we're told all this fancy stuff about this thing, and then we actually meet with the object. And now we have a meaning generality. We actually have a picture to go with the sound generality that's pumped us up so much. It's like, oh, I've heard about this new fancy rocket ship that's out there. Oh, they have these rocket and it does this. And it actually has like iTunes on the rocket while you're flying. And then, you've heard about it and you're like, man, I really loved it. And then you see the rocket ship with the iTunes and all this stuff on it. And you're like, oh, this rocket. And now you've got this picture in your mind that doesn't go away. You've thought about it. You've built it up. Now you got this rocket. You got a picture in your mind that doesn't go away. And now you're going to compare rockets to that picture in your mind from there on. And you've already got a basis of exaggeration to work from. So every rocket's this big rocket now. Every rocket is now like, this rocket, and every, when you hear about this fancy food, and then you finally eat it and taste it, and it tastes really good. Now you have this image, and like other things now will let you down in comparison to it. You have this image of this perfect thing, the way that it was supposed to be, that you're comparing things to, and you're not only comparing things to, you're actually bringing this image up and from a file in your mind as, oh, this is what a good meal would look like. This is this fancy meal. I'm going out to a fancy restaurant. And your mind goes like, I remember what a fancy meal looks like, because that fancy meal I had before that was $100 for a plate. Wow, we're going to a fancy restaurant. That's really cool. Those things are like $100. I went there once. Now it's going to be twice. And then like, that's not good enough. After it becomes not, then it's like the next thing comes up. Maybe like, oh, now there's $200 plates. And now the $100 plate that was the fanciest thing you could ever have is now trash. And what happened? Just time passed. This thing before was this thing that was the greatest thing you could ever think of, that somebody said, we're going out to that fancy place, and you used as your frame of reference for what fancy was. And now all of a sudden you heard about a $200 fancy, and this thing's not fancy anymore. Where did its fanciness go? I thought it was fancy. I thought your mind adhered to that, grabbed it and said, this is something that's so fancy. But now where'd the fancy go, that there's something fancier? So where's fancy? And as Nagarjuna says, in the precious garland, if the mirage were actually water, those who were nearby would see the water. And you move closer to this thing that we think is so great, this $100 meal. Is it so fancy? Is it objectively fancy? We say, oh yeah, it must be. Then we say, well, why is there fancier? How fancy is it compared to fancier? Is everything under this, everything here and above fancy? Where does fancy start? So this is where we have to see. We superimpose all of these ideas about our reality, and we name it. It brings it into being, and that name holds so much weight in our mind. That name makes a picture. That name guides us around by the nose. Just think of the person that you love. Say their name. Something happens, or think about, you know what I mean. So the Buddha is saying that this is the problem. This is the problem with all of us. It was the problem with me before. Buddha's saying, I figured out the truth. Not a reality was only Buddha's reality. It's just the reality. It's not Buddhist. It's just reality. And the Buddha figured out that the problem with our whole life is this grasping at things as having this identity from their own side. We believe they can hold themselves up without our participation, just like, someone could just stand up out of a chair. And that idea, the example we gave, like, if somebody has no legs, working, and they need to stand up out of a chair, they require support. They can't stand up on their own. And all of these objects that we give these values to don't stand up on their own. We just superimpose that they do onto it. And we cover it, as Jeffrey Hopkins say today, with mayonnaise of inherent existence all over all of it. And we can't see it. It conceals the truth of the object. This appearance that we all have, this innate grasping, just covers everything in a way that doesn't allow us to see it clearly. It's just at a haze in a film. And that haze in that film makes everything appear to us as objectively, inherently, intrinsically existent. And because of that, we think things are worthy of our attachment. We think things are worthy of our hatred. And all the while, we're constructing in terms of putting together collections and merely naming them based on this exaggeration, this idea of this kind of grasping at things as being the way they're not. So then we're off to the races. And if we believe everything is inherently existent, that means that at any moment, things that I don't hate or love, I can hate or love. I can be pushed or pulled towards anything. Because if I believe they're inherently existent, objectively existent, then any item in the universe at any moment could cause me to become attached or hate it. And that feeling of attachment or hatred is a disturbance of the mind. And that disturbance of the mind is what we don't want. That disturbance of the mind is happening when we're neutrally not even attached or hating it, just believing it truly exists. And that disturbance of the mind is what the Buddha said is what makes you all feel so bad. What makes you all just have to be born into this kind of way that feels so bad, called samsara. Because you misperceive everything. And as soon as you stop misperceiving everything, there's no way to create this samsara. There's no afflictions to give rise to an experience. You have to have the afflictions there to give rise to kind of set off karmas. They have to be there. The afflictions aren't there. Even if karmas are left over to produce a result of suffering, there's nothing to activate them, even if there's something that's left. So this is the name of the game, getting to the view of emptiness through the understanding of the reason of dependent origination. Understanding that things dependently originate, they do not hold themselves up, they do not stand alone, they are not, unitary, they're not independent. You have to start to see that even when you look at cause and effect, Lama Tsongkhapa says, forget about nominal designation. Just look at a farmer's understanding of dependent origination. Look at cause and effect. And when you see that the results depend on their causes, you see that the result has no autonomous nature. It doesn't stand alone. And as soon as you see that, you can actually understand that things don't have inherent existence and then apply that to permanent phenomena, Tsongkhapa says. So Tsongkhapa is saying you could see what a farmer sees and see that things don't inherently exist. And then get to, collect wholes and parts and nominal designation. But you can see there's no inherent existence because there's no autonomy when there's cause and effect. This is what the Heart Sutra is talking about. There's no eye, no ear, no nose. There's no inherently existent eye, no inherently existent nose. There's no eye or nose that stands on its own, inherently existent from its own side. So when we apply this to everything, we start to see how this can loosen our trouble. Okay, so the Heart Sutra. Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of Sangha monks and a great gathering of Sangha bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, has should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita. Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajaparamita, should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness. Emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye, dhatu, no mind, dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind, conscious, dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth. Since there is no deception, the Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way. So again, this refers to the Om, body, speech, and mind. Auma, when we look at an Om, we have implicitly within it these three syllables that refer to body, speech, and mind. Here, we can say the pure body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. It's like the head of the mantra. But then we can look at our body, speech, and mind and see how we're doing in terms of the gates and so forth. So we look at our body, speech, and mind and see how we are doing in relation to the path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, and path of no more learning. So when we recite this mantra, it's a meditation in and of itself of the 5 paths. Teata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoa. Teta 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 om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoa. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, "Good, good, O son of noble family. Thus it is, O son of noble family. Thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice." When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced in praise of the words of the Blessed One. Aga samara jasandara samaraya vede adon gate gate paragate parasangate buddhisoa baba gonchisunji gaye de medoji lobodoji mebodoji shewadoji dragi vaji medubijanaji shedengari so gerenda jaje jewada medun vejanandra dan the monju junjimbosu tumba junjimbun zum joji dashi de jandenda de lejo. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Sanje jadan zaji janan la janju badu dani jazuji dagi jije jibe zonanji drala benje sanje jubasho. Sanje jadan zaji janan la janju badu dani jazuji dagi jije jibe zonanji drala benje sanje jubasho. Sanje jadan zaji janan la janju badu dani jazuji dagi jije jibe zonanji drala benje sanje jubasho. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there's grasping, you do not have the view. Okay. So we're looking at the Lama Tsongkhapa's source of all my good. We won't go on for much longer because I do want to end a little early this evening.
Can you share screen, Jeff? Sorry, share screen.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's why we didn't all see the Heart Sutra.
Yeah, it's okay though.
It's not a new problem I have to forget to share screen. So at least I'm consistent. All right. So we're going to look at Lama Tsongkhapa's source of all of my good, which encompasses all of the teachings that Pabunka Rinpoche says we can break into 4 parts. Parts that deal with finding a teacher first, then the parts that deal with what you do once you found a teacher, and then the third part, which deals with supplications and requesting to always have no obstacles and have anything that could stop as far as obstacles end, and then a prayer to be able to supplication to be able to, the 4th category, supplication to be able to achieve all of the grounds and paths and never be separated from perfect lamas. It starts with the source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. And then it ends with this idea that if the foundation of all of our good is the teacher, if everything good that will come, for me, comes from a teacher, comes from someone who can explain the holy Dharma to me, then it needs to end that, okay, in all my lives, until I achieve all of these grounds and paths, until I become a Buddha, may I never be separated from that which is the source of all my good. Because all of my good, the most good I can have is Buddhahood. So that's the most good I can have. So the source of all of my goodness, of my, highest goodness, the source of my highest goodness, which is complete reliability and omniscience, is a teacher who can lead me through these stages, is a teacher who can show me precisely how to achieve exactly what I need to achieve. If my goal is freedom from suffering and bliss. So it starts, the source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. How to find and serve a Lama. Now we get into what you do once you have, and this first stanza deals with, Lama Tsongkhapa kind of like saying, hey, guys and gals, you all have this human basis that is incredible, that you have the Dharma in your life, you're in a world where it's here, you have all these incredible qualities, the 8 leisures and some of the 10 opportunities. Tsongkhapa doesn't mention the 10 opportunities here. Pabunka says because we don't have all 10, but we have all 8. So we have all this incredible basis from which we can do amazing things. And in the Lamrim Chemo, we see that Tsongkhapa then next tells us about the 3 scopes, and in a very abbreviated way. He's almost like, you've got this human basis, check out what you can do with it. And this is how you would take its essence night and day. And then Tsongkhapa goes into all of the stages, small, medium, and great scope in order. But you'll notice at the beginning of the Lamrim, he entices you with what you can do with this human basis by saying, hey, if you want a good rebirth, you can get that. Hey, if you want to have liberation, just an abiding nirvana, you're a solitary realizer, I've got the scope for you. I've got a way for you to get that. If you want Buddhahood, I can make you get that. And you know why you can have that? And you know why it's possible for you even do these things in this life that will make you have these 3 kinds of results happen? It's because you have this human basis. And this human basis is so potent. So in the Lamrim Chemo, that's kind of how it's displayed. It's displayed, you have this human basis that's so awesome, and here's what you could do with it. And if you're interested in what I just said, here's all the stages of the path in order. And if you're, but let me tell you, the kind of bad news is that I tell you right after death, after this life of leisure and opportunity, it's that death will come, nothing can stop it. You don't know when you're going to die. And the only thing that can help is Dharma. And then Lama Tsongkhapa just leads us through the Lamrim. My body, so it says, bless me first to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find, ever so hard to valuable. We don't know when we're going to get it. It's so difficult to get. It's just so easily lost. The causes are difficult to get it. We have to have these kind of, ethics and these aspirational prayers and practice of the 6 perfections. We have to have all of these qualities to get this basis. And we found it just this once. We say we found it many times in our previous lives, but right now we have it. We have this in our hands, this ability we have this human basis, and we have these texts in our hands that give us the ability to practice these things that can bring us to freedom from suffering and perfection. But we need to realize that we're going to die, so we better hurry up. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring, follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then ever to be careful to stop the slightest wrongs of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. We realize that we're going to die, and then in the Lamrim Chemo, it says you better reflect on your future life. And when you do non-virtuous things, they lead to negative results. And when you do virtuous things, it leads to positive results. So the Lamrim starts telling us, modify your behavior, folks, if you don't want these awful results of suffering, because non-virtue causes suffering, virtue causes happiness. Grant me to be ever careful to stop the slightest wrongs, the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. Because now we've learned in the Lamrim that virtue causes happiness, non-virtue causes suffering. So obviously, at this point in the Lam Rim, we're seeing that we don't want rebirth in the lower realms of cyclic existence. So we have to stop these wrongs and carry out virtues, and then night and day want to get out of the lower realms. And that's a small scope realization, night and day wanting to get out of the lower realms. So now we move on to the medium scope. So this section, what we just went over, deals with what's called the small scope, dealing with a way to get a higher realm rebirth, dealing with the ways to achieve high status in the humans, demigods, and gods. But then the practitioner, when they move from the small scope to the medium scope, is advised and taught that all the realms of cyclic existence are suffering. All of the realms of suffering, cyclic existence, have at least pervasive compounded suffering. And when we look at the sufferings that we have to endure, and many beings have to endure in the desire realm, we find the 8 sufferings, the 6 sufferings, and the 3 sufferings. And when we look at these very carefully, these are just empirical realities for the most part. That are undeniable: birth, aging, sickness, and death, meeting with the unpleasant, separating from the pleasant, not getting what you want, suffering of the, appropriated aggregates, our physical, mental suffering. No one's going to argue with Buddha about that. The 8 sufferings are pretty inarguable. 6 sufferings get more subtle. 3 sufferings even more subtle in terms of like, okay, everyone may not agree. But the Buddha's really presenting us with things at this point that's very convincing in terms of this is the superior truth of suffering, this is the superior truth of origin, this is the superior truth of cessation, and this is the superior truth of path. So here we start the medium scope. Bless me perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead of for the happiness of freedom. And one of the 6 sufferings is the suffering of insatiability. We have the suffering of uncertainty, and then we have the suffering of insatiability, where we're just never satisfied. We're just not, we could have, it said that the real awful part of this human existence is that we can have everything that we want and we're not satisfied. So everything that we think, all of these things that we think will cause us happiness are really just suffering of change. They will really lead us to suffering of separation, meeting with something that's not pleasant, and not getting what we want because we don't like, being separated, or we wanted something that we couldn't have, that we felt we gave overvalued in terms of, what we thought, it meant to us, in terms of what would make us happy. And this kind of thinking, this wrong thinking, this deluded thinking, this thinking that things have this intrinsic existence, inherent existence, objective existence, and then saying these things will make us happy, these things have this much value to make us happy, is the door to every pain I have. Grant me sin to strive instead of the happiness of freedom. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teachings. So we find in this presentation of the Four Noble Truths, if you want to get out of cyclic existence, you have to practice the 3 highest higher trainings, beginning with the highest higher training in ethics, and then concentration and wisdom. So now, that concludes, we went over it in great detail. I'm just doing a quick glance, and I'm going to get us to where we are. So now we move on to the great scope. And the great scope says, okay, so there's an abiding nirvana. The great scope begins with the selfish kind of attitude of the medium scope still. Blasphemy. It does. It starts with the being who's not a bodhisattva saying, wait a second, an abiding nirvana, I haven't fulfilled all of my own needs. Starts there, folks, because you just had renunciation. You just definitely wanted to emerge for yourself. Now you're saying, wait, so you were thinking of your own self-interest for renunciation, and now you're saying, like, this thing isn't even good enough I wanted. It wasn't as good as I thought because it doesn't fulfill all my needs. I can't have bliss. I can have freedom from suffering and get rid of the afflictive obstructions, but I can't have bliss because I'll still have obstructions to omniscience. So I got to figure out how to fix that and get to the better deal. Then you realize that the better deal is only gotten to by putting others' needs before your own and working for their sake. And then you say, may I become a Buddha? May I become a Buddha, not this this idea is lost of renunciation. May I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So we're putting others' needs before our own in order to fulfill our needs and all sentient beings' needs. This idea sometimes gets lost that it's to fulfill our needs and sentient beings' needs. So it says here now that we move into the great scope, we move into the aspiring bodhicitta section. How do we get aspiring bodhicitta? I was just giving you a moment to say it to yourself. You can get aspiring bodhicitta through the two causal methods, equalizing, exchanging self with others, passed down through the profound view lineage through Nagarjuna, or 7-point cause and effect, and or 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, passed down through the extensive deeds lineage from Maitreya to Asanga and so forth. And you can combine these practices as we talked about and went over. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for its enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. So this is aspiring bodhicitta. Now we move on to this section of engaged bodhicitta, where the actual bodhisattva vow is talked about, the 3 moralities is talked about, and the bodhisattva vow falls into the first category within the 3 moralities. So aspiring bodhicitta is what you have to actually get a bodhisattva vow. We can have a contrived form of it, a facsimile of it, but in order to get a bodhisattva vow, in order to have engaged bodhicitta, which is someone who has a bodhisattva vow, a bodhisattva with a bodhisattva vow has engaged bodhicitta, we say. In order to get that, you have to have the mental basis of the path of accumulation. This mental basis has to be there where you have aspiring bodhicitta. It's just everywhere you read. You have to have aspiring bodhicitta, actually have a bodhisattva vow manifest in your continuum. It's the mental ground that's necessary. So we take bodhisattva vows to become familiar with them so that when we have the mental ground, we'll connect with the bodhisattva vow. So it's interesting. Bless me to see clearly that the wish itself is not enough, for if I'm not well trained in the 3 moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Grant me then a fierce resolve to master the bodhisattva vows. So again, the 3 moralities we talked about were the morality of abstaining from non-virtue, the morality of gathering virtue, and the morality of working for sentient beings. So the morality of abstaining for non-virtue, those common moralities, abandoning the 10 non-virtuous activities, refuge vows and so forth. As a Buddhist, these kind of common things that we all do. And then the individual things that people will take on in terms of vows, individual liberation, pratamoksha vows, or taking on the bodhisattva vows, taking on the tantric vows. So here we're talking about bodhisattva vows. This falls into that first morality of abandoning the non-virtue in terms of the vow itself. But carrying the vows out and working with the vows, we can say falls into all the other categories too. But the bodhisattva really first works at this first category of morality. Second category of morality is of gathering virtue. And we found those 8 ways of gathering virtue in Gensan Rinpoche's book, The Bodhisattva Vows. You go over those because you have to accumulate and amass virtue to become more skillful to be able to do the 3rd morality, which is work for the needs of sentient beings. If you don't have clairvoyance, you're kind of like swinging in the dark and hoping you're hitting a ball when you're working for another being's needs. You're really limited in what you can do for them and knowing if you're doing it right for them. So it says, that you're evolving to be able to be the most helpful helper. And that 3rd morality of working for sentient beings becomes something you can really do better as you focused on the first 2 more through the bodhisattva path. So it's interesting. So that's all the commentary I'm going to give for this evening. I'm going to read the rest of it and then just end class a little bit early. And I just wanted to quickly go over those things and get us up to speed, because next week we start shamatha and special insight and then go into tantra. So hang on, everybody, to your hats. It's going to get bumpy. A wild ride is going to happen, and there's information is headed your way. So tonight we'll just read through here and we'll leave it at that. Grant that I may quickly gain the path where quietude and insight join together. one which quiets my mind from being distracted to wrong objects, the other which analyzes the perfect meaning in the correct way. Grant that at once I practice well the past shared and become a vessel that is worthy. I enter with perfect ease the way of the diamond, highest of all ways, holiest door to come inside for the fortunate and good. Bless me to know with genuine certainty that when I've entered thus, the cause that gives me both the high attainments is to keep my pledges and my vows most pure. Grant me then always to keep them, even if it costs at the cost of my life. Bless me next to realize as well as I can the crucial points of both the steps, the essence of the secret ways. Grant me then to practice as the holy ones have spoken, putting all my effort in and never leaving off the practice of the 4 times highest that there is. Bless me, grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road, here's that third category again, Pabunka's saying, where there's these supplications made, third, and then the fourth category is the 14th stanza. Bless me to grant me that the spiritual friend who shows me this good road and all my true companions in this quest live long and fruitful lives. Bless me and grant me that the rain of obstacles, things within me or outside me that could stop me now and stop and end forever. In all my lives, may I never live apart from my perfect lamas. May I bask in the glory of the Dharma. May I fulfill perfectly every good quality of every level and path and reach then quickly the place where I become myself, the one who holds the diamond. Oh, we're so fortunate. And I know I went through kind of these stanzas in a glancing quicker way, but we've been over these. We've got so many classes on the source you can see on YouTube and so forth. If you want to get caught up to speed on each of the stanzas and looking at them with a magnifying glass. We really looked at that stanza about the 3 moralities, I mean, for months to try to extract what it meant and know it a little bit more. So thank you, everybody, for listening and for allowing me to create the virtue of teaching the Dharma. I feel so fortunate to be able to do this. So we read now the prayer for the flourishing of Jitsongkapa's teachings. It's something the Nejong Oracle recently said that everyone should be reading. Many great Dharma centers that we know of read it. And I think it's so wonderful. It was Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings were so close to Rinpoche's heart. And that's all he taught, really, were Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings. And of course, teachings of the great Nalanda Pandits. But he always had Tsongkhapa's commentary handy to be able to explain everything. And I just feel so fortunate to be connected to this holy lineage that, yeah, so fortunate. Prayer for the flourishing of Jitsongkapa's teachings. Though he's the father, producer of all conquerors, as a conqueror's son, he produced the thought of upholding the conqueror's Dharma in infinite worlds. Through this truth, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. When in the presence of Buddha Indraketu, he made his vow to conquer his offspring, praised his powerful courage. Through this truth, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. The lineage of pure view and conduct might spread. He offered a white crystal rosary to the sage, who gave him a conch and prophesied. Through this truth, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. His pure view, free of eternity or destruction, his pure meditation, cleansed of dark fading and fog, his pure conduct. Oh, I think I just skipped that. No, that's right. His pure conduct, practice according to the conqueror's orders, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Since he extensively sought out learning, reverent, rightly applying it to himself, good, dedicating it all for beings and doctrine, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Through being sure that all scriptures, definitive and interpretive, were without contradiction, advice for one person's practice, he stopped all misconduct, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Listening to explanations of the Tripitakas, Tripitaka is also correct. Realized teachings, practice of the 3 highest higher trainings, his skilled and accomplished life story is amazing. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Outwardly calmed and subdued by the hearer's conduct, inwardly trusting in the 2 stages practice, he allied without class the good paths of Sutra and Tantra. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. Combining voidness explained as the causal vehicle with great bliss achieved by method, the effect vehicle, heart essence of 80,000 Dharma bundles. May the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. By the power of the ocean of oath-bound doctrine protectors, like the main guardians of the 3 beings' paths, the quick-acting Lord, Vaishravana, Karmayan, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. In short, by the lasting of glorious gurus' lives, by the earth being full of good, learned, reverend holders of the teaching, and by the increase of power of its patrons, may the conqueror Losang's teachings flourish. So wonderful. If you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you're attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there's grasping, you do not have the view. Concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I've made, I apologize. They were inadvertent. I didn't I'm sorry, and may they be purified by this mantra of Vajrasattva. Let us all imagine that our body, speech, and mind is being purified with this mantra, imagining Vajrasattva in the space in front of us, inseparable from our root deity. Imagine that light, rays, and nectars are showering down on us, transforming into white, red, and blue light, rays, and nectars that are turning into white, red, and blue homes, respectively. And we imagine that these white, red, and blue syllables are dissolving into ours and all sentient beings, body, speech, and mind, and purifying ours and all sentient beings, body, speech, and mind. So just imagine this Vajrasattva in the space in front of you, and this rain of blessings of Om, Ahom, Om, Ahom. White Oms, red Ahs, blue Homs are just showering down on you and all sentient beings. White Oms dissolving into your crown, purifying your body. Red Ahs dissolving into your throats, purifying your speech, and blue Homs dissolving into your hearts, purifying your mind. Om Benzasata Samaya Manubalaya Benzasata Zainavajita Dedameva Zatagaya Meva Vazubakaya Meva Anarada Meva Vazavaziri Mebra Jazawa Kamasuja Mekitem Trianguru Ma Obagavanza Vatakata Benzamamimoga Benzabava Mahasamaya Sapa Ah Home Fate. May we always be protected by Paul and Lamo. Jorama Jorama Jojarama Jinjakalara Jimorama Jida Jinjarama Jorama Jorama Jojarama Rama Vajada Junja Ridong Jong Jarama 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 Jigala Jarama Jida Jinja Ridong Jong Jarama 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 Jigala Jarama Jida Jinja Ridong Jong Jarama 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 Jigala Jarama Jida Jinja Ridong Jong Jarama 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 Jigala Jarama Jida Jinja Ridong Jong Jarama 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 Dunja Kalara Jemo Rama Vajada Junja Ridong Jong. Any obstacles you have to meeting with the Dharma, may they be removed from this with this mantra of Drapu Sundri. Om Vajrapani Haya Griva Garuda Om Ve. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samanta Bhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised the Supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds in that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains. You are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. We're so fortunate to have His Holiness the Dalai Lama in our world. May he remain and keep coming back again and again and again to help us so that we aren't so blind and we can eventually wake up as he has. And now we'll read this prayer of supplication to Namgyal Khentsur Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, my root guru. I spent 25 years with. Feel so fortunate. Feel so fortunate. Thank you, Khentsur Geshe Wandak. Thank you, Rinpoche, for coming into this world and sharing the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. Understand there are persons of 3 capacities, small, medium, and great. I shall write clearly to identify their individual characteristics. A being named Lord Atisha said, and then a being named Khentsur Geshe Wandak came here to really just tell us what that meant and told us over and over what that meant. And some of us are kind of know now. A complex yogi poses as a simple monk, written on March 6, 2023 by myself 1 year after Rinpoche passed. Homage to Khentsur Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om Ahom. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like a teacher who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. Now that sound is stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood the sadness in treating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It's by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our heart would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a good week. I hope you can make your mind more and more virtuous, because that's how you'll be more and more happy. And that is what we all want, is to be happier and to have less suffering. And if we stop creating the causes for suffering and only create the causes of happiness, eventually that's all we'll experience. So let's work on that. Thank you, everyone, so much. Good to see all of you. See you all next time. I appreciate it.